The alien's hand struck her across the face. The sound echoed in the crowded square. Sharp, cruel, final. The crowd of onlookers froze. Most were alien citizens, used to such displays of dominance. They turned their eyes away. No one dared interfere. She was small, fragile, just a human woman in a world where strength was everything, but the soldier who hit her didn't know. Didn't know that the man she belonged to was human too. Didn't know that in humanity's blood ran something older than fear, sharper than mercy. Somewhere beyond the crowd, her husband heard the commotion. He turned. His eyes found her. And then the alien. The air shifted. The crowd felt it before they understood it. Because when you strike a human's wife, you don't face a man. You face the storm. And the storm was already coming. Before the strike, before the crowd, before the storm, there was only life. Ordinary, fragile, and achingly human. Her name was Alara, a woman who carried laughter the way others carried armor. She was small by alien standards, soft-featured, with hands that knew the rhythm of planting seeds more than wielding weapons. On this world, far from Earth, she and her husband had carved out a simple peace among giants. The colony was little more than a fragile outpost, a scattering of human families who believed that coexistence was possible. That trade could flourish, that neighbors could learn from neighbors, even if those neighbors towered over you with scaled skin and voices like grinding stone. Her husband, Marcus, was a builder, strong in body but stronger in silence. He repaired hull plating, raised homes from barren dirt, and held to the belief that humanity could thrive anywhere, if given the chance. To the locals, he was just another off-worlder. To Alara, he was the anchor, the quiet gravity that kept her small world from drifting apart. Yet beneath his calm, there was always something coiled, something old, something that belonged to every human who had ever been underestimated, enslaved, or dismissed as prey. The aliens didn't see it. They couldn't. To them, humans were fragile newcomers, tolerated only so long as they stayed quiet. The soldiers in particular despised them. Their empire had conquered half the sector. Why should they fear frail bipeds who bled so easily? Still, Marcus never forgot. His father had fought in the border wars. His stories weren't of glory, but of survival. He taught Marcus that peace is borrowed time, and humans must always be ready to pay it back. Alara, though, she softened him. She believed in kindness, in building something that would outlast cruelty. She tended the gardens outside their small dome, trading food with alien merchants, smiling even when they mocked her accent or her size. She believed humanity's gift wasn't destruction, but endurance. And yet, even she had noticed the soldiers lately, watching more closely, passing the humans' stalls with sneers that lingered too long. The colony elders whispered of stricter levies, of tribute demanded in silence. Something was shifting in the air. Marcus felt it in his bones. He'd walk Alara to the market and scan every face, every armored patrol. His hands would tighten unconsciously into fists, the old lessons thrumming under his skin. When the moment comes, don't hesitate. Alara teased him for it. "You see threats in shadows, Marcus," she said one evening, brushing soil from her hands as the suns set. "This world is harsh, but not hopeless. Not everyone is an enemy." He only nodded, because he loved her hope too much to crush it. But his eyes stayed on the horizon long after hers closed to sleep. For a time, life continued, a fragile balance. Work, laughter, meals shared among the small human enclave. Alara humming as she worked, Marcus carrying supplies on his broad back, neighbors waving with tired but hopeful smiles. But peace is always temporary, and predators always test the line. On the morning of the incident, Elara walked alone to the market. She carried a basket of fruit, humming softly. The square was crowded, the banners of the alien empire hanging like silent threats above every stall. Soldiers prowled lazily, armored and armed, their laughter carrying like gravel across stone. Marcus wasn't far, but he wasn't near either. He was bent over a shattered power coupler in the colony's edge station, sweat running down his arms, unaware that everything was about to change. The first words spoken to Elara that morning were not of trade, or greeting, or kindness. They were a demand. A soldier's shadow fell across her. His hand hovered too close. His voice carried disdain, and though she tried with all the patience she had ever carried to smile, the strike fell anyway. The square went silent. The storm, though unseen, began to rise. The square was silent. Silent in the way a battlefield grows silent just before the killing starts. Elara's cheek bore the red mark of the soldier's strike. She staggered, clutching the basket that spilled its contents across the stone tiles. Bruised fruit rolling, squashed under armored feet. The alien soldier stood over her, sneer curling his jagged mouth. Around him, his squad laughed, the guttural sound cutting like knives. To them, it was amusement. To her, it was humiliation. To Marcus, it was war. He arrived with the slow, deliberate steps of a man who already knew what must be done. His tools still hung at his belt, a hammer, a plasma torch, but he carried himself as if armed with something far greater. His eyes locked onto Elara, then shifted, cold as steel, to the soldier. The soldier didn't notice at first. He shoved Elara back, enjoying the flinch, the way the small human seemed to crumple before him. To the Empire's warriors, this was natural order, predator and prey. But Marcus broke that order the moment his voice cut the silence. Step away. Just 2 words. But they carried weight. A weight that made the crowd flinch. The soldier turned, surprised, and found himself staring into eyes that were not afraid. Eyes that belonged to a man who'd built homes with his hands, buried comrades with those same hands, and now clenched them into fists that promised violence. Another little human, the alien drawled, his laughter sharp. Do you want me to strike you too? Is that how your kind begs for attention? Marcus didn't answer. His silence was louder than any retort. He stepped forward, placing himself between Elara and the alien squad. His body blocked her entirely. His stance was unshakable, like stone against a storm. The soldier barked an order, and 2 more armored figures stepped forward, weapons half raised. The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers rippling. Humans in the square tensed, but none moved. They knew the cost of resistance. But Marcus wasn't like the others. He didn't see cost. He saw his wife. And in that moment, every lesson his father had taught him returned like fire to dry grass. The alien moved first, lunging with a heavy gauntlet aimed at Marcus's chest. Marcus sidestepped. His hand shot out, seizing the alien's wrist. The crowd gasped as bones cracked beneath human grip. The soldier roared, stunned by the strength in a man he had dismissed as fragile. Marcus didn't stop. He twisted, drove his elbow into the alien's throat, and in the same motion tore the soldier's sidearm free. By the time the alien hit the ground, choking and writhing, Marcus already had the weapon aimed at the others. The square erupted. Shouts, panic, boots pounding stone. Alien civilians scattered, screaming. Soldiers snapped weapons up, caught between fury and disbelief. No human had ever dared. Not here, not against them. Marcus! Elara's voice broke through the chaos. Not fear, warning. He turned just in time to see the second soldier charging, blade drawn. The strike came fast, but Marcus moved faster. He ducked under the swing, drove the stolen pistol up, and fired point blank into the soldier's chest. The blast sent the warrior sprawling, smoke rising from the burning wound. For a heartbeat, silence again. The smell of charred flesh in the air. The crowd frozen in disbelief. A human had killed a soldier of the Empire. Marcus lowered the pistol only slightly, his chest heaving. He looked at Alara, her cheek red, her hands trembling, but her eyes locked onto him with both fear and something deeper, belief. Then the spell broke. Sirens wailed. Reinforcements were already rushing toward the square, armored carriers rumbling down the streets. Marcus knew what was coming. This wasn't just about a soldier striking his wife anymore. This was the spark of something larger, something unstoppable. He pulled Alara to her feet. "Run!" But Alara didn't move. She stared at him, tears streaking her face. "If you fight, they'll kill you." Marcus shook his head, his grip steady on her arm. "If I don't fight, they'll take everything. Go." She hesitated, then obeyed. She vanished into the crowd, swallowed by the chaos, and Marcus turned to face the storm he had unleashed. The reinforcements came fast, a squad of 10, armored and disciplined, weapons raised. The first shouted for him to drop the pistol. Marcus didn't answer. He leveled the weapon, fired, and the fight began. Bolts of energy scorched the market stalls, tearing fruit and fabric into ash. Civilians screamed, diving for cover. Marcus moved like a man possessed, ducking behind stone columns, returning fire with precision that spoke not of training, but of instinct honed in bloodlines that had survived every predator the galaxy had ever known. He dropped 2 before they even closed the distance. Then the pistol whined, overheated, and died in his hand. He threw it aside and reached for his hammer, the simple tool of a builder. In human hands, it became a weapon of war. The first soldier swung a blade. Marcus shattered it with a downward strike, the hammer crunching into alien bone. The second came at his side. Marcus twisted, drove the hammer into his chest, and sent him sprawling across the stone. Every movement was brutal, efficient, fueled by rage that was cold and clear. But numbers pressed in. Blades slashed his arms, armor fists drove him back. Marcus bled, but he didn't break. He fought with everything, fists, elbows, teeth when he had to. And for every wound he took, another soldier fell. By the time the square was littered with bodies, Marcus stood alone, chest heaving, blood soaking his shirt. The surviving soldiers pulled back, dragging their wounded. None dared step closer. Not yet. Above, engines roared. Dropships. More reinforcements. Marcus spat blood, lifted his hammer and stared at the sky. His body shook with exhaustion, but his eyes burned. The storm wasn't over. It had only begun. In the hours that followed, the colony changed. Word spread like fire. A human struck back. Some said Marcus was already dead, cut down by overwhelming force. Others whispered he was still alive, vanishing into the ruins, hunted by the Empire but unbroken. Alara wept, clutching the cloth he had left behind, praying he would return. But deep inside, she knew. Marcus wasn't gone. He was the storm they had unleashed, and storms don't fade quietly. The Empire had made a mistake. They had struck a human's wife. Now they would learn what that meant. The city burned. From the moment Marcus raised his hammer against the soldiers, the colony had ceased being just a settlement. It had become a battlefield. Smoke clawed at the sky, alarms shrieked across the streets, and the alien Empire's soldiers flooded in, hunting for the human who had dared break their dominion. But Marcus was no longer just a man. He was a storm moving through their ranks. Every step he took was deliberate, each strike brutal and unyielding. He fought with scavenged weapons, discarded rifles, his hammer slick with alien blood. He moved like a predator in terrain that had never known his kind. And wherever he went, whispers followed. Humans watching from windows, aliens murmuring in disbelief. One human, standing against the Empire. They called in heavier forces. Armored carriers sealed the streets. Drones circled overhead, their targeting lights painting the broken stone. The alien commander arrived at last, draped in obsidian armor, voice amplified by a translator that shook the air. "You will kneel," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the ruined square where Marcus stood alone. "Your defiance ends here. One man cannot fight an empire." Marcus spat blood, lifting his hammer as though it weighed nothing. His chest heaved, ribs broken, but his eyes were fire. "I'm not one man," he growled. "I'm human." The commander signaled, and the streets erupted with gunfire. Beams of plasma tore into the walls, blasting craters into stone. Marcus dove into cover, rolling behind shattered stalls. His body screamed in protest, every wound burning, but he pushed forward. Always forward. He surged from the smoke, hurling a scavenged grenade. The explosion rocked the carriers, flipping one onto its side in a burst of flame. He leapt onto another, driving his hammer down into its engine, tearing fire from its belly. Soldiers spilled out, shrieking, only to be met by a fury they had never faced. The commander roared, striding into the chaos, blade crackling with energy. He swung, a strike that could cut through steel. Marcus blocked with his hammer, the impact rattling through his bones. Sparks flew, heat searing his face. The alien sneered. "You bleed. You break. You cannot win." Marcus's teeth were red with blood when he smiled. "I don't need to win. I just need you to know. You should never have touched her." He drove forward, fury made flesh. Hammer met blade again and again, each strike shaking the ground. The commander's strength was monstrous, but Marcus fought with something deeper than muscle. He fought with the rage of every human who had ever been dismissed, every heart that had ever been broken by cruelty. The fight dragged across the square, bodies strewn in their wake. At last, the commander landed a blow, the blade cutting deep into Marcus's side. He staggered, dropping to one knee. The crowd watching from the edges gasped, alien voices mixing with human cries. The commander raised his blade high. "You die as prey!" Marcus's hand shot up, seizing the commander's wrist. Blood poured from his wounds, but his grip tightened, bones cracking under human strength. His other hand lifted the hammer one last time. "For Ilara," he whispered. The hammer fell, bone shattered, armor crumpled. The commander's head struck the stone, the echo rolling like thunder. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Then, the commander did not rise. Marcus swayed on his feet, chest heaving. Around him, the remaining soldiers faltered, eyes darting. Their leader was gone. Their dominion broken in front of the very people they sought to control. He raised his hammer high, dripping blood and firelight, and for a heartbeat, for one eternal moment, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. And then the chant began. Soft at first, from human lips trembling with awe. Human. 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 The word spread, rolling like a wave, until even the aliens watching whispered it in disbelief. Humanity had been underestimated. Again. And again, they had proven the galaxy wrong. Marcus dropped to one knee at last, strength bleeding out of him. His vision blurred, but he smiled. Not at victory, but at the knowledge that his wife was safe. That they would remember this day. That humanity had shown them all. The storm had broken the Empire's silence, and nothing would ever be the same. The smoke had not yet cleared. The square was littered with bodies. Alien soldiers sprawled in twisted heaps, their weapons smoldering in the dirt. The commander's obsidian armor cracked like broken stone, his lifeless form a monument to arrogance undone. And in the center of it all, Marcus knelt. His hammer rested in the blood-soaked earth, his chest heaving, every breath a ragged battle against the darkness closing in. His body screamed for surrender. But surrender was not in his nature. The crowd that had once cowered in silence now stood transfixed. Humans pressed forward from alleys and doorways, eyes wide with disbelief. They had seen their kind beaten, mocked, pushed to the edges of survival. They had endured, but never had they seen one of their own rise. Ilara pushed through them, her heart pounding, fear choking her throat. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands clutching his face, tears streaking her dirt-stained cheeks. "Marcus," she whispered, voice breaking. "Please, don't leave me." His eyes opened, heavy but steady. He smiled faintly, the storm in him settling into something softer. "I told you, I'd protect you." Around them, silence stretched. The aliens who had gathered to watch a punishment now witnessed a revelation. The Empire's strongest had fallen. Not to an army, not to technology, but to a single human armed with nothing more than resolve and a builder's hammer. Whispers spread like fire through the crowd. One man against them all. Human. They cannot be broken. The soldiers who remained did not advance. Their weapons trembled in their hands. They had numbers. They had power. But none dared step into the shadow of the storm. And then, something unthinkable happened. One of the alien civilians, a merchant who had mocked Ilara's size only days before, lowered his head, not in fear, but in respect. Another followed, then another. The ripples spread outward, until the entire square bowed their heads toward the bloodied human who had stood when no one else would. For the first time in living memory, the Empire's grip cracked. News traveled fast. Within hours, stories of the human who defied the Empire spread beyond the colony, carried on stolen transmissions and whispered on smugglers' ships. Worlds far from the sector spoke the name of a man they had never met. Not Marcus, but the human. The one who stood. The one who fought back. On some worlds, the story was told in awe. On others, in fear. Commanders cursed his defiance, warning that humanity's spirit was more dangerous than any fleet. But among the oppressed, among the silent and broken, hope stirred. If one human could strike against giants, what could many do? Marcus survived, barely. Ilara bound his wounds with trembling hands, refusing to leave his side even as whispers of retaliation grew. The humans of the colony gathered around them, no longer hiding in silence. They carried him to safety, guarded him as though he were more than a man, as though he were the symbol they had been waiting for. Ilara wept as she held his hand. "You've started something you can't stop," she whispered. Marcus's reply was soft, his voice raw. Good. Because he knew. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. In the days that followed, the Empire tightened its grip. Armies mobilized, fleets repositioned, the colony braced for retaliation. But something had changed, something no army could undo. The people were no longer afraid. They had seen what humanity could do when pushed too far. They had seen the storm rise, and they knew it would rise again. Ilara walked through the colony square days later, hand resting on Marcus's shoulder as he leaned heavily against her for support. The scars on his body would never fade, but neither would the memory of what he had done. Children stared at him with wide eyes, whispering as though they were in the presence of a legend. Neighbors who had once spoken only in hushed tones now met his gaze with pride. Marcus did not seek their reverence. He only wanted his wife safe. But he could not deny what had happened. He had become something larger than himself. A symbol. and symbols, once born, cannot die. Far away, in the Empire's halls of power, rulers debated in hushed voices. He was only one human, they argued. Yes, another whispered, and that is what makes it terrifying. For in their arrogance, they had forgotten the truth. Humanity was never meant to be measured one by one. Humanity thrived in defiance, multiplied in adversity. If one man could topple their commander, what could an entire species do when provoked? The answer chilled them. The colony slept uneasily, but with hope. And in the quiet of night, Marcus lay beside Alara, his hand entwined with hers. His body ached, his scars burned, but his heart was steady. He thought of his father's words, spoken long ago. Peace is borrowed time. One day you'll have to pay it back. He smiled faintly into the darkness. He had paid, and though more would come, fleets, armies, wrath, he knew humanity would endure. Because the Empire had made a mistake. They had struck a human's wife, and the galaxy would never forget what followed.